Peptides, should you mix them or keep them separate? I want to talk about something I get asked about constantly. Can you mix peptides together? Should you be stacking them in the same vial, the same syringe, running them at the same time? And honestly, the answer is more interesting than most people realize. Every peptide has its own chemical personality, its own charge, its own pH, its own structure and size. And when you put two of them together in the same solution, they don't just sit there politely ignoring each other, they interact. Sometimes that's fine and sometimes it really isn't. GHK-Cu, for example, carries a positive charge from the copper ion. BPC-157 has a completely different charge profile. Put them together and they can start attracting each other, binding to each other rather than doing the job you actually want them to do. And sometimes you'll physically see it. The solution starts to look different, more gel-like, thicker, and that's not nothing. That's a sign that something chemical is happening in that vial. And without extensive studies on that specific combination, you genuinely don't know what is working and what's not working. I like to think of it as twins fighting. They're both capable, they both have a job to do, but stick them together in a small space and suddenly all their energy is going into the argument rather than the work. Beyond the chemistry, here's the more practical reason I would keep them separate, especially if you're new to peptides. If you run BPC-157 and TB500 at the same time and something happens, good or bad, you have absolutely no idea which one caused it. You can't troubleshoot what you can't isolate. Run them separately and build a really clear picture of how a body responds to each one. That information is valuable. It makes every future protocol smarter. So what's the alternative to stacking? And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. What if instead of running everything together, you rotate through them? So week 1, BPC-157, week 2, TB500, week 3, GHK-Cu, week 4, KPV, for example, and then start back at the beginning. Here's why that's a really interesting form of research and one that you should think about. Each of those peptides is targeting a different repair pathway. BPC-157 is working on localized tissue repair. TB500 is driving systemic cell regeneration. GHK-Cu is rebuilding collagen and elastin and managing inflammation, and KPV is calming gut inflammation and the immune response. So instead of throwing all of them at your body at once, which we know very little about, you're cycling through every major repair mechanism in sequence. More net healing potentially and a much cleaner picture of what's actually working within the body. There's also the receptor argument. Cycling off a peptide gives your receptors a reset. When that peptide comes back around, it's landing on fresh, sensitive receptors rather than the ones that have been adapted to it being there constantly. Nobody's done the clinical study that definitively proves rotation is better than stacking. This is informed inference from individual peptide research, chemistry principles, and what experienced practitioners in this space have observed. But that's actually exactly why keeping things separate matters so much. The more carefully you track your own response, the more you contribute to your own understanding and eventually to the wider conversation. Peptides are highly individual. What works brilliantly for one person can land completely different for another. The only way to figure out what works for you is to give each compound a fair, isolated test to start with. So separate, rotate, and track everything. As always, this is educational content only.